people don't realize. We are always on the precipice of a rude awakening. This is a nature of the human condition. And I think that the theory of enchantment just helps people. It equips people with the mental tools to be able to deal with that.
So is it all online, the course?
Yes, the entire course is online on a platform called Teachable. So if folks are interested, they can check out theory/of/enchantment.teachable.com. And it's 25 lessons. Each lesson is roughly 60 to 90 minutes long. Some lessons are longer because I teach entire films in the course. But that's fun, so it's okay. But yeah, so it's cool because I think it goes one step further in terms of recognizing timeless wisdom. Like it pulls timeless wisdom not only out of, the Stoics, but also shows how Disney's The Lion King contains Stoic teachings in it. And like how even Nike ads contain certain fundamental truths about the human condition that will always be true. And about the hero's journey, Nike is really famous for that, and so it's cool because it is able, I think, to speak to a younger generation while also speaking to older generations that may have encountered Stoicism and other classic teachings in college and things like that.
Do you mainly market to a certain age group, or?
Yeah, so the theory of enchantment is for individuals ages 14 and up. So I've taught teenagers, I've taught professional development teams and corporate settings. So I would say it's not really for like early childhood education, but 14 and up when you're transitioning from adolescence to adulthood and further on into adulthood.
Mm-hmm. Here's another quote for you.
Okay.
This one is actually from Paul Vanderklay, not from Jordan Peterson, but it's based on, I think, his understanding of Jordan Peterson's work.
Okay.
Your disadvantage is your superpower.
Okay. Yeah, that's probably based on Peterson's whole idea. Like, I don't know if it's his quote where he says, the thing that you're seeking is in the place where you least want to go.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Can you say it again? Can you say the quote again?
Yeah, well, and I'll give you the parentheses too.
Okay.
Your disadvantage is your superpower. Parentheses, overcoming, and this is so obvious, it almost hurts, but that's the way most truth is, right?
Yeah.
Overcoming hardship produces greatness.
Yes. Well, yes. By the way, that is the Nike business model in its entirety. That is how they became, a global brand. That's what they sell. That one sentence. And we buy it because we know it intuitively. We feel it, and we've experienced it as a species. I don't know that I would define it as a disadvantage though, because by definition it becomes an advantage. So words are tricky in that way, but I get what he's saying. I'm trying to see if I can apply it specifically to I think in terms of as a way of understanding the development of wisdom, like wisdom as a concept. If we are to hold that wisdom is something that more or less is unchanging, because the human condition is more or less unchanging, then I would say that the ability, for example, to know that you must confront the fact of your own mortality or wrestle with that in order to become wise. I think that is an idea that certainly, I teach in the theory of enchantment, and that is an idea that would be a natural outgrowth of that statement about disadvantage. Because it is a disadvantage that we will die one day.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's the biggest disadvantage.
Right? Yeah, and yet the ability to make peace with that is one of the biggest advantages in the world.
Well, we were talking earlier about how everything is so meta.
Yeah.
And to me, there are a couple of rules that are meta all the way down. And this is one of them, really, because this is basically saying the same thing as saying limitation is necessary for creativity.
Yes, and this is how you can see how this marries the benevolent father with the benevolent mother, right? And because the benevolent father is limitation, right? Discipline, order, and the benevolent mother is creativity, the ability to look at chaos and the unknown and create out of it. And he talks about this when Peterson talks about this when talking about the Taoism and the yin yang concept as well. So yeah, I think that is a perfect um, description of how the archetypes can be balanced and merged together in a healthy way.
Well, and see that the space between
Mm-hmm.
the boundary, the space between all things have a boundary.
Mm-hmm.
Particles have a boundary, molecules have a boundary,
Yeah.
cells, people, we all have a boundary. Everything has a boundary.
Yeah.
What keeps us in, it keeps us cohesive. So we have an inside and an outside.
Yeah.
But the edge is also a connection. In art, the edge connects the different pieces of the painting to each other, right?
Yeah.
And the edge has to have a certain quality to it to maintain that connection. So if you think about cells in a living being, they have a boundary that keeps the cell integrated, but they also have the capacity for osmosis, for things to travel back and forth. So the boundary has a certain mode of being that permits connection and also permits protection. And so those things go all the way down, but the boundary is necessary for creativity. The limitations are necessary for creativity. And like I said, these things are so obvious that they've been stuff our mothers have handed down forever. Necessity is the mother of invention.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Very, very meta.
but
And
it's
I
very
think this
meta.
goes to your earlier question, or I think it maybe was a quote that you mentioned where someone could only see the tyrannical aspects of the father. Like this just demonstrates like why the benevolent aspects of the father is necessary or how it's necessary for creativity. Like you can't have one without the other.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the other thing I was thinking about is both of those aspects, the tyrannical and the benevolent, part of the gift that we're given by having to confront both of those aspects is that those are two opposite things that have to be held loosely in order to see what's actually there in the space. Because if you look at it only as tyrannical, you can't truly see who the father is. And if you look at it only as benevolent, you can't truly see who the father is. You have to be able to see both of them, right?
Which is why I teach Kendrick Lamar in the Theory of Enchantment, because one of his songs, Kendrick Lamar says, I got power, poison, pain, and joy inside my DNA. So this is like contemporary pop culture embodying the same ideas that we're talking about that are ancient. And he's like articulating his ability or his awareness of his inner complexity, of his capacity to produce the benevolent and his capacity to produce the destructive. And this is a constant theme throughout many of his albums, him sort of wrestling with himself and confronting his potential, both good and bad. So again, this is something that repeats itself, even in contemporary form. And my whole call to action, especially for my generation, is to not take pop culture for granted, but to actually consider that there are important aspects, important wisdom that even contemporary pop culture contains within it.